New reporting from the New York Times is shedding light on the role that the far-right extremist group, the Proud Boys, played in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. After studying footage of the attack and poring over internal communications by the Proud Boys, the New York Times found that the group moved in a coordinated manner that was unlike any of the other rioters storming the Capitol. The Times reports, quote, over and over at key moments when the Capitol was breached, the group used the same set of tactics, identifying access points to the building, riling up other protesters, and sometimes directly joining in the violence. When met with resistance, leaders of the group reassessed, and teams of Proud Boys targeted new entry points to the Capitol. I should note NBC News has not independently verified the Times' reporting, and lawyers for the Proud Boys deny that the extremist group had any kind of prearranged plan to storm the Capitol. The organization's former leader, Enrique Tarrio, along with four of his subordinates, are set to go on trial in Washington, D.C. in August. Joining me now is Clint Watts. He's an MSNBC national security analyst, a former FBI special agent, and a fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and Alliance for Securing Democracy. Clint, it is good to see you. So in addition to what we've heard from the committee, what does this reporting tell you about the level of involvement and coordination among the Proud Boys during that January 6th event?
Michael, several things have come up over the last week that I think is quite clear. One, you have Tarrio, meeting with the Oath Keepers. That's something I didn't know about in that parking garage the day before. That was at the start of the hearings. Separately, between the seditious conspiracy indictment that came out a couple of weeks ago, some of this new evidence that's come to light, the plan was very much about the Capitol. It seems it always was. Other revelations are things like they just went straight to the Capitol. It wasn't about the rally that day. The way they were dispersed and spread out over different entry points and their critical role at creating the breach sites. And I think what's fascinating about the conspiracy charges, they knew that if they could do some form of a breach, you would see others follow into the building, which has always been the case. At least from my perspective, what I've been trying to argue is not everybody there was an extremist, but the extremists that were there helped get everybody else into the building and really created that situation to where a lot of people that were just protesters now have the opportunity to commit a federal crime. And I think that's really why this is so important to get to the bottom of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys in this conspiracy.
Well, and that's a good point, because federal prosecutors say a document titled 1776 Returns was used by the leaders of the Proud Boys to lay out a plan to occupy Capitol buildings on January 6th, using covert operators to let patriots inside government offices in an apparent effort to enforce a new election. How could that be used as evidence against the Proud Boys, who deny that they had prearranged plan to storm the Capitol? But we got a document here that says otherwise.
Yeah, so a couple things, Michael. I think it is a useful document for the prosecution, but they also have to be careful because everything that's not followed in that document, imagine every individual that goes up says, I did not see that document, or I wasn't aware of it, or that isn't what I did. I actually did something else. It can actually kind of undermine a prosecution. I think the heavier weight of the evidence from what I've seen so far is in the indictment, which is the internal communications between the Proud Boys members, the leaders, and those that were around the building. And the way that they were celebrating the success was not just protesting, it was getting inside the Capitol. I think that's the most damning part of all of the evidence that I've seen so far. So, yeah, the document, the 1776 returns, it's pretty clear what they were trying to do, but you overlay that with the internal communications. That's where I think this will turn into a much more powerful prosecution over time.
Yeah, and all of this right on the doorsteps of the midterm elections. How concerned are you about local extremist groups that still deny the 2020 election results and the fact that we've got now a lot of these folks running for elective office?
That's my bigger fear, really, is the residual results of the insurrection is that protests have gone to a much more local place. You can see this across the country. Last year, we were talking about school board meetings getting really out of control. This year, we're going to be talking about local election places and election workers really being intimidated at polling places. In some cases, you have candidates who deny the results and outcome of the election running for office. In others, you have them endorsing or supporting candidates that deny it. And in each of these cases, you have a mix of what I would say extremists working alongside of them. I call it the Praetorian Guard sort of scenario where we can see intimidation of voters at city halls and town halls. We could see it at state capitals going into fall. And we kind of know what they will be. There's probably a dozen or so of these elections where we have these kind of candidates running and trying to deny the outcome of the 2020 election, which will probably lead to them denying the outcome of the 2022 election if they don't win. And that's a much tougher challenge, I believe, for the federal government to try and help protect. Who is in charge out in these locations? Does a city or local government have the capacity to do that? Think back to Kenosha, Wisconsin, which was quickly overrun whenever a large mass of people can get there. There's not enough law enforcement really to enforce any laws at that point. Whereas the Capitol, while it was a disaster that day, there was a response within a few hours. That won't be the case in a lot of these local and state jurisdictions.
Clint Watts, thank you, my friend, as always. Really appreciate you. Coming up, no one knows Trump's bullying and grifting better than his former fixer and right-hand man, Michael Cohen. He joins me right after this break.